Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now, very, very honored and happy to have him, is Professor Noam Chomsky, who has been a public intellectual, linguist, activist for decades, and is author of course, many books, including Manufacturing Consent, co-author of that book, big influence on me and this show. Most recently, he's author of Internationalism or Extinction, Universalizing Resistance. Professor Chomsky, thank you so much for being here.
Pleased to be with you.
Can you give us first your broad reaction to the uprisings that we've seen across the United States and in fact globally over the past couple of weeks, centered very specifically and initially on the police murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and then encompassing race, policing, capital, and so on. What are your thoughts as you look at these movements happening?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the absolutely unprecedented scope, scale of participation, engagement, and public support. I mean, if you take a look at polls, it's astonishing. The public support, both for Black Lives Matter and for the protests, is well beyond what it was, say, for Martin Luther King at the peak of his popularity at the time of the I Have a Dream speech. It's way beyond that. And that's it's also far beyond the level of reaction to earlier events. Now, there were public reactions, strong ones, to many earlier police killings, but nothing like this. Maybe the most similar was the reaction to the beating of Rodney King, beat him almost to death, after the attackers were freed in the courts without charge. There was a week of protests. 60 people were killed. Had to call in federal troops to quell the protest. But it was in Los Angeles where it happened. Something elsewhere, nothing like this. No, it's everywhere. And it's not just the police killing, it's background issues. So it's beginning to move into concern and inquiries and protests about the facts that lead to events like this occurring. Shows an enormous rise in consciousness, belated, but a rise in consciousness about 400 years of vicious repression, unremitting, leaving a very bitter legacy, deep issue in the whole socioeconomic and cultural order. I think the recognition of that and willingness to act on it is without any precedent that I know of.
What do you think accounts for the unprecedented nature of this?
I think it's the result of many years of intensive activism. We see it in many other ways. So, for example, a year or so ago, the New York Times ran an important series, highlighted an important series, 1619, on the history of racism in the United States. 1619, because that was the year when black slaves began coming in substantial numbers, scattered cases before, but it was from 1619. You couldn't have imagined that a few years ago. And that's one of many signs of what I hope are really significant changes that seem to be in the way, which are a tribute to the groups like Black Lives Matter, others who've been bringing these issues to public attention, making people think about them, learning what happened. The reaction right now, say, to Trump's Tulsa appearance. bringing up the hideous record of that. That's quite important. When you go back to, say, Ronald Reagan, when he opened his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, a town which is known for only one thing, the murder of 3 civil rights workers. The message was pretty plain, but there was very little reaction.
There's much more reaction now, and the parallels are quite stark there. It's very hard to get a grasp on something like this in terms of various types of reporting, misinformation, and so on. So we need to approach it gingerly. But as someone who has a rooting in some respects in the anarchist tradition, I think maybe in many respects, what is your thought on this autonomous zone that's arose in Seattle?
It's one of a number of very interesting developments, in part reactions to the pandemic, in part reactions to this, creating structures of mutual support and cooperation that extricate themselves from the governmental structures, which have been shown to be completely inadequate in dealing with either particular problems like getting water to people in need, or fundamental problems of why we're so desperately unprepared for crises. The autonomous zone is an interesting case of this. Also striking to see the support. The mayor of Seattle supports. Apparently plenty of popular support. And it's driving Trump and Fox News insane, but that's a positive sign. So something important has happened. Again, what it'll lead to, you never know. But I think it's an important manifestation of the sense that we've got to take our lives under control, that we can't leave them in the hands of the authorities who declare themselves our masters. We have to take charge.
Is it important to reframe that a bit, that something can arise and may even result in quote unquote failure, but if there's information in it and if it expresses a certain impulse towards justice or and so on, that it doesn't need to be kind of linearly measured as a quote unquote success or failure?
Success and failure are complicated things. Any serious struggle is going to have moments of regression. Things don't work out the way you expected. So you pick up, you go on from there. Anyone you can think of, civil rights, women's movement, abolition, all of them. It's a process. And so take, say, the Sanders campaign. A lot of young people, I get letters all the time, see things posted, say, we tried, we lost, it's over, I'm getting out. It's not what happened. What happened was a tremendous success, unparalleled success. Nothing like this has happened in U.S. political history, actually almost ever, since the real populist movement, the radical farmers movement, was crushed by force. Here's the spectrum of discussion has been substantially shifted. Things that were not on the agenda not long ago are front and center. Universal health care, called amplified by the pandemic disaster, Green New Deal, the result of serious activism by a small group of young people who occupied congressional offices. In the background was the Sanders success, young members of Congress who swept into power were able to support them. Now that's on the agenda, issue after issue. Sanders has made the tactical decision, which some criticize, but I think is correct, to join the Biden campaign and push it to the left. His associates are working on planning commissions. And in fact, if you look at the program that's emerged, it's farther to the left than anything since FDR. Offers lots of opportunities. Now, this didn't happen by magic. It happens kind of like the Green New Deal, happened by constant pressure and activism. That's the way the left ought to conceive of elections. Pushing the button is not the issue. It's the constant activism that is reshaping the array of choices, issues, and policies. And you don't win by snapping your fingers. Some things work, some things fail, then you pick up and you go on from there. And I think we've seen significant changes over the years.
I think the title of tonight's episode might be "You Don't Win by Snapping Your Fingers," which is unfortunate, if only it were so.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.